Welcome to Designing Hollywood podcast. I'm your host, Georgina Curtis. Designing Hollywood podcast is dedicated to all things movies and the movie industry high-profile talented professionals. Our guest today has many film credits, including Lovelace, Cake, The Green Mile, and The Notebook. Her TV credits are no less impressive, including work on cult favorite Friday Night Lights. Currently, her designs can be seen on both Underground and Preacher, two shows that highlight her creative range. The acclaimed costume designer comes from a long line of show people. She is a Los Angeles native, which is more rare than it might sound, and the third generation in her family to work in film. She started working on film sets after college, and a friend told her that she was the best dressed camera assistant I've ever seen, and suggested she give costume design a go. She has quoted, "You should know everything you need to about a character before they open their mouths and say a word, and you should know it from the costume, the hair, and the makeup." Please give a warm welcome to costume designer Karyn Wagner to the Designing Hollywood podcast show. Karyn, you eventually moved on to movies and then television, working with famously opinionated indie directors. What moment in time do you remember thinking, this is what I want to do, career-wise, and how did you get your start in the industry?
So I actually have a degree in art history and in painting. And I had originally wanted to become a camera assistant so that I could paint with light. That was like my great dream. The industry wasn't really ready for women to be in the camera department in the 80s. And as you noted earlier, I was at a friend's house. All us geeks from play production all got into the film business. And I was kind of complaining about, the culture on set and in my department. And she said, well, you're the best dressed camera assistant I've ever seen. Why don't you come try costumes? Okay. And with all the love and patience in the world, she trained me up. I had been sewing since I was probably 3. We weren't allowed to watch TV at my house.
Wow.
So my mother was like, go entertain yourself. So she sewed, my grandmother sewed. So I started sewing very early, like doll clothes and clothes for the dogs and stuff like that.
Amazing.
And so it just kind of made sense. And I don't even know that I chose it so much as it chose me. I just fell into it and it was just so natural and it made so much sense between the art history and the painting and understanding. I also have what somebody else once termed as a superpower, which is that fabric talks to me. So that I will walk into a fabric store and I'll see a bolt of fabric and I'll go and I'll touch it, feel it, and it'll tell me what it needs to be.
Oh my gosh, 2 dreams today. I'm meeting a costume designer and a superhero all in
right?
one person.
I mean,
amazing. So you've designed costumes for both television shows and feature-length movies. Mm-hmm. What's the biggest difference between the two for you as the costume designer?
These days, television is really more like a long movie. So I read a great quote the other day, and it said that we are clothed in culture, where we've come from and where we're going. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was so at the bone marrow of what I do. I'm a great people watcher. I've always been really fascinated in what makes people tick. Mm-hmm. And in TV, you get more time to develop those ideas. In films, you can gesture to them, and try and get the big notes. But in TV, you can subtly have a set of rings that, that somebody circulates from one hand to the other and then doesn't wear for 2 episodes. There's things you can do that you just have more time in TV.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
You did an interview where you mentioned how hearing the music to the movie helps inspire you to put more color in the costumes. How much collaboration do you have with the other departments?
As much as I possibly can. I'm about to start a film, and I called the director of photography, who's very, very generous. And he walked me through all the things he wants to do with light. And we talked about, I think because I trained as a painter, I'm very aware of light in different parts of the world. And I will very often do a job interview where I say, well, and then there's the character without any lines, and that's the light. And we have to, make sure that that character is invited into the room. So I work very closely with the director of photography, hopefully the production designer, the set decorator, the prop master, hair, makeup, the director, of course, and try and get us all on the same, make sure that I understand what everybody's needs are. Stunts needs long sleeves, right. Makeup might need more coverage so they don't have to spend as much time aging somebody up. So those are very practical reasons, but also I think when you know where everybody else is headed, sometimes you can be the glue. And that's very exciting for me.
Super exciting. Is it true you found your calling and it happened to tie in with your family's history of sewing?
Yeah, but yes, I would say, of course. Yeah. I took it a step further because I taught myself very basic draping and pattern drafting and things like that. But I remember seeing my mother sort of cutting out her own patterns out of wax paper and then pinning them, like cutting off a sleeve. Like she would get a pattern and she'd spread it out and she'd be like, yeah, but I don't like that sleeve. And she'd draw out a pattern, on wax paper and then take straight pins and pin it to the original pattern and like make it a thing. Wow. So I come from a very creative family anyway. Everybody paints or is a musician or sews or does all those things. My mother was also a master knitter, which I never had the patience to really. I know. She made a sweater for Martin Landau in the Green Mile.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, sorry, the Majestic.
That's incredible.
I know. So I come from a very creative family, and the onus was always to create, to make, to see art, to absorb art into your soul. And so because of that, I had this really great upbringing. The house was filled with art books, So, yeah. So it was like all kind of meant to be, I guess.
That's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's jump right into The Notebook.
Okay.
A film you designed. It's become a classic romantic story of two young lovers from different worlds who get a second chance. It made stars out of Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, propelling them into the international spotlight. Tell us about your experience designing this time period film. Any specific challenges?
I wouldn't say... No, I wouldn't say there were really any big challenges. So I would say that the only challenges there really was I'm always very hard on myself to try and get it as perfect as possible. I found a very interesting, when I was looking at the different classes that they come from, I really wanted to get that right, and I've talked before about how Allie's mother is sort of this big unspoken character in the movie. She doesn't have that much screen time. Joan Allen, played by Joan Allen. Right. But everything that she's grooming Allie to become, is portrayed, she's clothed in it.
Right.
Whereas Ryan's character comes from the wrong side of the tracks. He's poor. They wear clothes until they fall off their backs, he and his dad. And so their clothes are coming from Sears and Roebuck and the general store. They're not going to New York 4 times a year to have new wardrobes made for every season. So that was the biggest challenge, is to make sure that social disparity was very, very clear in the costumes.
Amazing. What inspired Ryan Gosling's character Noah's looks?
I would say definitely Sears catalog and the Great Depression. Because I felt like even though this was the 40s, the United States was still coming out of the Great Depression, and his dad would have been very young, maybe even married his mother. He would have been born in the Great Depression. So that sense of not wasting anything, that sense of wearing everything until it wears out, until it can't be mended any further.
Right.
Whereas Allie's family is like, oh, that's last season's, just give it to the maid or give it away to charity,
Yeah.
We're done with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Did it come to you right away, or did you find yourself changing your mind with Allie and Noah's looks?
No, it came right away, and the only thing that I would say that changed is that I come in with too many ideas. I recently described myself as one of those Disney scenes, where the file cabinets open and all these things comes flying out, like trying to attack me.
Right.
And so I have all these ideas and I'm always trying to crowd them into one dress, and eventually have to let go and say, this dress can only inhabit 7 ideas. It can't inhabit 26. So in that sense, I have to let go of things, not change my mind so much as hone in what's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally loved the color palettes you chose. I thought they were so pretty.
Thank you.
Talking about color.
Yes.
Tell us please about the blue dress Rachel McAdams wore. Your inspiration behind that blue dress that Kobe Bryant ended up gifting his wife Vanessa.
Yes, he did. He gifted his wife one. Well, I made several of them.
Wow.
She had stunt doubles and she had photo doubles, and
Right.
they were in a canoe, and I was like, if that canoe capsizes, she's got to have some spare dresses.
Right.
But he did gift her one, which was so I was so touched by that. I was so touched. To think that your work lives on in perpetuity and brings so much joy to other people.
Right, what a beautiful gesture.
Yes, it's the biggest gift of all.
That's
the
gorgeous.
biggest gift of all.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
Okay, how about The Green Mile starring the amazing Tom Hanks?
Such a wonderful man.
Oh my gosh.
So generous. So personally
exciting.
generous, emotionally generous and generous with the actors on set.
Yeah.
Just makes the space so safe for everybody to do their very best acting. He's just amazing to be around.
Such a legend.
Yeah.
So how was your experience designing this movie, and specifically how was it with Mr. Hanks?
So the thing that I love to talk about on The Green Mile is that even though it's on the surface a very simple movie, I made almost every single article of clothing. So I made all the prison uniforms. I invented the guard uniforms. Guards weren't wearing uniforms yet, except for Sing Sing. And so I took an amalgam of things that I wanted, again, the file cabinets went crazy. And I really wanted it needed to be, Frank Darabont wrote the most stunning script. But within it, there was this unspoken intimacy between the inmates and the guards. And I felt like the actors needed something to help themselves understand where the line in the sand was, so to speak. So whereas guards in the day were wearing just like overalls and tank tops, and you knew it was a guard because he had a gun, I was like, we need a real visual identifier. So the uniform is based on a cross between the New York City Police, which is, by the way, what the Nazis also used to rip off their SS uniforms.
Oh, wow.
And there's a little bit of fighter pilot from World War II in there, just some detail. And I was like, but I need to still make them approachable. So I used the 8-pointed hat that milkmen wore. So you look at him and you're like, uniform, but look at that hat. How bad can he really be? I can talk to this guy. Right. So the guards so their uniforms are invented. Pretty much everything that everybody wears in the movie is made because the clothing of the time is rotting. It's like it can only last so long, and then it just starts to say, I'm so sorry, but we're done here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people are bigger now, so so I just made everything.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's such a moving movie. It
is. I still cry every time I watch it.
Me too, Karyn. I can't help it.
But I was there for all that shooting. That's the hilarious part.
Right.
Yeah.
Incredible. Also, another time period film. Would you say these sort of films are more challenging to design? I mean, even what you just said about the sizes, I guess that could be seen as a challenge in a way, just because it meant you did have to.
I wouldn't say it's a challenge,
right?
Because being a geek and a control freak, I love to control every single little thing. And then when I look at the director, I'm like, well, that's not available as a rental. I can't go to the 1942 Walmart and buy it. I have to make that. Yeah. So it's going to be exactly what I envision that character wearing. And they're like, go, kid, just go make it happen. So you could see it as a challenge, or you could see it as a tremendous opportunity to really really say what you think about the character in terms of clothing. So I that's why I love doing period so much. Every once in a while I'm like, I'm going to take something contemporary, and I'm just tired of like chasing fabric and chasing buttons, and can we use zippers yet, or like do the clothes have pockets yet, or like all these things. And then I did go to contemporary, and I'm like, if I have to go to the mall one more time this week, I cannot guarantee anybody's safety.
Right.
But so the next period thing that comes in, I'm like, let's go with the period thing. Yeah.
What are some of the most enjoyable memories for you in terms of films you have designed and learned a lot from?
Wow. I've learned something amazing about almost every one. Some of the period films I've done overseas, the challenges there have been really interesting because every country is missing something you would take for granted. Like when I shot in Thailand, they don't have shoe dye there. They don't dye shoes. And you're like, but I need a pair of red shoes, or Germany doesn't have this, or Belgium doesn't have that, Right. But going to another place and shooting a movie there, I love being on location because there's always something new to be learned, somebody new to be met, some crazy point of view, that I would never even dream of, and I feel so lucky, really, even when I'm in territory that's a little uncomfortable for me politically, or, doesn't match my particular belief system, it's like, all right, well, just shut up and listen. They're not going to eat you for breakfast. So just, or they might try. Probably not. Just shut up and listen. You'll learn something. Right. And you meet the most amazing people. I remember a Teamster in Texas once saying to me, I don't like you very much, but you're a really hard worker, so we're going to be friends. And I was like, all right. Okay, let's go with what you said. So, it's just, I think that's what keeps me so excited about everything. It's just that there's always something new to learn.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Can you roughly explain to us how you explore a character through costume design? Every designer is unique. Walk us through your thought process.
So I'll read the script first just to see what the storyline is, and then I'll go back through and read it again to really focus on the nuances of language that the screenwriter uses. The screenwriter is everything. So whatever they put on the page it defines the choice between a white dress and a red dress. So I'll go back, I'll read for like the nuances, and then I'll sit for a minute or 12 and sort of imagine. And the things that come to my mind are not always clothing related. Sometimes somebody's a tree or an insect, or like I'm designing a movie right now, and I found these pictures on Instagram of these butterflies or moths that are completely transparent except for their wingtips.
Wow.
And she plays a woman who's passing for white. And I'm like, there she is. That's my character. She said, right there is this insect. And then I go through the period research and I start pulling images, and I'm like, okay, that's that character. That's that character. And then from there, I'm like, well, I love that photograph, but it's not her. Who is it? So then I start to assemble almost pages of a book in a way for each character. And I post them. I use an app called Slack. And I'll post the photographs that I love for each character in their own little place on this app. So then I can just go back and reference it. Like if I get pulled off course or something by a pair of shoes, or I don't know, that. I'm like, no, that's not her.
Yeah.
She's
that's
this.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm so
process.
excited to see this new project of yours.
Oh, it's amazing.
And I can't wait to see this character where your inspiration was those butterfly wings. That sounds super exciting.
Yeah.
Just walk us through like your process of, how you go from a character into then designing for them. And I guess you said that beautifully in that nutshell just now of how you build these inspirations and then
inspiration
work
boards.
from there.
And then from there, it becomes, sometimes it's a drawing that I have to find fabric for, and sometimes it's the fabric as I was talking about my superpower earlier, sometimes the fabric says, oh, I belong to this character and you need to make this dress for me.
Yeah.
And I'll take a swatch of the fabric home and the dress will just come, So it's weirdly trying. The thing that I work the hardest at, I would say, is keeping an open mind.
Right.
And looking at everything and then discarding what doesn't work.
Right.
Instead of like focusing on one thing and saying it has to be this, I go in with a much wider idea or thought or feeling. I also have synesthesia, which is where numbers have smells or colors have numbers or colors have sounds. In my art history, and I didn't know what to make of it because I knew it, that I had it as a child, but I realized by about 6th grade that nobody else had it. So it's kind of one of those things you just tuck away and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about how Wednesday is green. I'm just going to shove that under the table for now. And then I read this book in school, in college, and it's I can't remember the name in German, but it translates as Sounds. And it's written by a Russian painter who was living in Murnau, which is southern Germany in Bavaria. And he was painting there as an art movement called the Blue Rider. And he writes this play, and it's all about sounds talking. It's all about colors talking to one another.
Oh, wow.
It's like this loud processional of colors. And I'm like, okay, somebody gets it. And so that is definitely part of my process. So I'll pull in a yellow, that I'll fall in love with this yellow swatch, and I'll be like, well, does this yellow, and the yellow will be like, no, I'm way too loud. And you're like, yeah, you're right. And also, I'm 14 and your characters are all like 3 through 7. And you're like,
God, I love that.
Yeah. So it's weirdly helpful.
Yeah.
Because the other thing you learn to do as a costume designer is you learn to trust your gut. And you just know when something's wrong or when something's right. And I finally developed this, later on in my career, I finally developed the courage. Like when the director says, well, why do you like this and you don't like that? I'm like, it just feels right.
Interesting.
And they'll look at me and they'll kind of like cock their head and they'll go, okay, I can't argue with that.
Is there anyone that you have like an example of? Like, is there, like, were any of Ali's dresses meant to be a certain color and then you decided it's not going to be green, it's going to be red? Has that like ever kind of happened where you've gone from just one idea to completely new?
I'll tell you a story about Lovelace.
Okay.
Where she goes to the Playboy Mansion. And I based the dress loosely on something that the real Linda Lovelace did wear, not at that time, much later. But it had to be a white dress. I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell the directors why. I came with a drawing. I came with a swatch. And I'm like, it has to be this.
Wow.
And they went, well, I don't really see that. I'm like, I get it. But it has to be this. And they're like, okay. I mean, they're really great directors, amazing, amazing supportive men. And they were like, okay. And then I took the swatch and the drawing to the DP and I said, this is the dress. It has to be this. I need you to backlight it. So she appears as a star on the stage in this white dress. And I never use white. I never use white and I never use red.
Right.
But it just for some reason. And then I subsequently realized that the dress had to be white because her husband takes her for some really foul mistreatment after this. Like, she's this big star on this night and he's so mad at her for being this big popular person and more popular than him in the room. So he takes her someplace else to punish her terribly. And then the dress becomes something, she's wearing this white dress after she's been serially raped. And she gets out of the car and she tries to escape from her husband and she trips on the dress. So she trips on the purity, right, of her sexuality and the purity of her soul.
Right.
So like there's an example of where like a color just, it had to be that. And I was going to be crying. Like if I couldn't. That. And there's another example in Cake. Where those directors did a really brilliant thing and they brought the creative department heads together for a weekend. And we were all meant to bring images and things like that. And one of the things I brought was one of the scenes I felt had to take place in a jungle. And I knew it couldn't take place in a jungle and it made no sense. But I had this gut attachment to this jungle scene.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're shooting that scene, and we show up on the day, and one director looks at the other director, and they're like, get the production designer over here. And they're like, can you put some green dye in the pool? So it's like these things just bleed when you're a creative person and you're around a lot of like similarly open-minded creative people. Right. Ideas are never your own. They're like everybody's idea. They become commonly held ideas, which is the best.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And may I just ask about the white dress? Was that like something that came to you like off the page when you were reading the script, or was that just something that progressed like as the character developed? You just felt like you needed her to be in that white dress?
It was one of there's always a dress that I find hard, that eludes me for a while. And then I'll be standing in the shower or walking the dog or driving down the street or making coffee, and then the dress, like Athena from Zeus's thigh, like the dress just comes and hits me over the head. Sometimes knocks me out. I wake up and I'm like, all right, let's draw, guys. And that was one of those things. Like, wow. I knew that dress had to be special, and I knew what was like sexy for the time, and all of that didn't feel right, and I didn't know why. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, because it has to be this thing. It has to be not sexy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our show. Karyn, what are your next upcoming projects that we can look forward to seeing? What do you have in the works for 2021?
So I'm very excited about a film that's in post-production right now. It's called Alice, and it's half antebellum and half 1970s.
Oh, wow.
And when I was reading this, another really, really brilliant script, written by Kristen Verlinden.
Yeah. And
she, it starts out kind of like standard slavery plantation, like, why did my agent send me this? Like, kind of weird. And I'm reading, and so I'm like, God, this is about the time she escapes. And sure enough, she starts running for the tree line, and you're like, okay. And then she's running, and she runs through the stream, and you're like, okay, I've made this. Well, like, I don't know, I've made this before. All right, I'll keep reading. I'll give it 10 more pages. And she hits a 4-lane highway and nearly gets run over by an 18-wheeler.
Oh, wow.
And you find out that it's 1970. Or 1973, and she was born free, and that her plantation, that the plantation owners had kept like no electricity, no press, no radio. They weren't allowed to learn to read, none of that. And you're like, wow, is this magical realism? And then I started delving, because my other great nerdy obsession is research. I am a rabbit hole girl like nothing you've ever seen. And I discovered that this script was based on true stories. Several of them. These plantations were discovered in the late 60s.
Oh my gosh.
So these people had been enslaved for 100 years after they were free.
Oh my God.
So then the whole thing, and then it was like another one of those things that just like came to me. And I was like, her dress, I knew we were shooting in Savannah. And I know I've shot in Savannah quite a bit. And I know that the trees are filled with Spanish moss.
Yes.
And I said, her dress, and I called the director, and I was like, her dress has to be the color of Spanish moss.
Wow, I love that.
She has to like be there but not be there. So that when she starts dressing in 1970s clothes, it's a real departure.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. And I'm about to leave for Atlanta to shoot Tyler Perry's next movie, which has been his dream project for 26 years, he told us today. We had a big production meeting on Zoom. 26 years he's been wanting to, and he honored me by choosing me to design the costumes. And I'm so excited. It starts in 1940 and goes to 1947. And it starts with sharecroppers and goes all the way to like a big jazz club in the north. So there's like,
oh my God,
feathers and dancing girls and a big band orchestra and men dressed in tuxedos. I'm like, yes. So I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I can't wait.
Me either.
Lots of exclamation marks after that. You have given students in past interviews this advice to have a go-get-it attitude, saying it's so important. Can you elaborate on that?
It's very, very important to want to learn. If you are not interested in learning, this is not the industry for you. So it's also very important to be willing to like throw all your energy into getting it right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be really passionate about this business. It's hard. It's a hard business, and people say things and people do things, and you get your feelings hurt all the time. And you can either choose to say, oh, you know, I'm going to curl up like a little pill bug, or you can say, I'm going to get this.
Yes.
I'm going to hammer this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to love it.
I got goosebumps just now.
And, you know, and students often ask me, like, what's the best advice I can give them? And I say, grow a hide like a rhino.
Right.
And just keep charging.
Love
you
that.
know, because the people who love their art so much that nothing else really matters, those are the people, you know, like I'm one of those people. And I don't really care what you say to me. I'm going to come back tomorrow with a drawing. And I'm going to be as in love with that swatch of fabric and those little, you know, chicken scratches on paper as I can possibly be. You say whatever you want. I don't care. So it's that, and it's also doing your research, being knowledgeable, being thirsty for that, being hungry for that, and never saying, I don't know. I can't stand it when I get an assistant or a PA or somebody who just looks at me and says, I don't know.
Right.
And I'm like, the right response is, I don't know, but let me find out. I'll be right back to you.
Right.
I mean, we have Encyclopedia Britannica in our back pocket. It's not that hard to Google whatever it is.
Sure.
You know? So, but you have to embrace it. So, I mean, my best advice to students who want to do what I do or want to do anything in life, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Embrace it, love it. If you don't love it enough, get out of it and find something you do love enough.
Love that. What other advice would you give to those looking to get into the same field of costume design? Outside of all the beautiful things that you just said.
I think that it really takes a commitment.
Yeah.
You know, I used to pull, okay, this may sound a little artsy fartsy hippy dippy, but I did grow up in Laurel Canyon, so fair enough. I used to pull this one tarot card all the time.
Ooh.
I don't remember what it was, but I do remember what it represented. And it said, show up, listen, pay attention, ask questions, don't be attached to the outcome. Meaning that the thing you think you want may show up differently than how you imagined it. Or the thing you think you want may be the thing that actually leads you to what you really do want, but you just couldn't imagine that.
Right.
So you have to embrace life, and you have to embrace your fear and make it your friend. I mean, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I give young people.
Yeah.
You know, don't be fearful. The fear will kill you before anything else will. So,
goosebumps. Where can viewers follow you on social?
Instagram is a great place. I post a lot of inspiration there. I don't post a lot of costumes, but I do post a lot of trees I love. You know, like this tree is going to be a dress one day. And, you know, and people are like, how? I'm like, I don't know, because it's not a dress yet. So that, and then my website, which is KarynWagner.com, but it's Karyn is spelled with a Y. So it's Kary and Wagner.com.
Great.
So those are probably the two best places to see my work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a few thank yous are in order. Thank you to the Designing Hollywood team, founder and producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder Marilyn Vance, and our wonderful guest, Karyn Wagner, for coming on the show today. A special thank you to our sponsor, Vincent Lapas, with the accredited Los Angeles Performing Arts Conservatory in Santa Monica, which provides training in acting, screenwriting, and filmmaking for beginners and advanced artists. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Designing Hollywood podcast for past and current episodes. Follow me, your host, Georgina Curtis, on @TheGreenGarmentGeekGirl, or on Facebook or under my name, Georgina Curtis. Till the next time. Ciao for now. Bye.
Thank you to our sponsor, Gardena Cinema. Gardena Cinema is the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in the South Los Angeles area. Owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976, Gardena Cinema has been able to transition to outdoor cinema in the parking lot for an intimate drive-in experience, and has hosted movie shoots, music video shoots, and still photo shoots for an authentic vintage-looking location. Thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and the YouTube channel for complete past and current episodes. Also, we're now available on Amazon and Siri Voice Search.